to that point, the energy is changing. I think the whole idea of who is on the street, who is attracted to come to New York City is very, very different. I heard a fact the other day that in a global sense, because I'm very concerned about the global community of the world as you see it in Queens, which is my particular bailiwick. Google in the month of February had usage of 80% outside of the United States. Facebook, 72% outside the United States. And Twitter, 70%. So that tells you that the world is connecting in many, many different ways, not necessarily on the streets of New York. So how do you reconcile your relevance in a physical way? I think that's architecture. I think it's design. I think it's the built environment. And so I look very closely at the built environment of New York, and I think, am I proud of this? Is this something that has pull for me? Is this something that attracts me, that I would want to be walking among all of this? Some of it I'm not so thrilled about. I think there's some preservation going on, that we just love these things because they're old, not because they're really cool or they're relevant. I think that there is also the idea that you can plan so much, but then there's things you can't plan, and it's this convergence that goes on all the time. So we are at the mercy of a lot of factors, and the resilience that we are known for as being New Yorkers, you know, you roll your sleeves up and, all right, just get out of my way, let's go. That is what is true and will remain and govern how we go forward. Preservation, as I define it, is a cultural thing. I can speak to the work that I'm really most involved with in that preservation context. I work with a lot of immigrant communities. And so the question of preservation is it the preservation of a culture that you left, or is it the preservation of a culture you want to build here as an American, married to someone of a different culture, going to a school with 49 different other nationalities going on? What are you preserving? So if I decide to define preservation for myself, it is that preservation of a creative citizen and a creative citizen class, and what is important for those people to have to build our new America. So development has to be part of that, because if you are not in banking or real estate, you're not part of the deal. You have to be entrenched in a community, you have to own, you have to be part of it. So when development comes into an area like Long Island City, like Jamaica, like Flushing, what is the dialogue that goes on between that community as you define it? Is it the cultural, is it the commercial, is it the immigrant, is it the media, local politicians? What are the convergences and what are the dialogues that have to take place for that community to thrive for the next 30 years? That's where I'm very, very concerned about it, that it is dialogue, and it is a constant dialogue. So my challenge is, how do you get them in the room? How do they know they have to be there? How do I make that possible in my role as an arts council? So I consider myself a preservationist in that I want to preserve your seat at the table for cultural policy, for urban policy, for whatever policy that governs how we are going to live together in a neighborhood. Well, I think that the idea of changing the name of the Art Commission to the Design Commission says a lot. I think Patty Harris, at the head of all of this, is a brilliant choice. And the idea of design being a real indicator of quality of life, and that being important to our mayor, is going to be his legacy. From just the simple design of the bicycle racks, the ones that were designed by, I think it's Better Lab in Copenhagen, that kind of look like the spoke of the wheel. Those are things that really speak to the fact that he cares. This is an important thing to somebody who's riding a bike. And part of the whole idea of greening New York and just having people become more attached to the idea of preserving this environment, that design quality or that design piece speaks volumes to me. The High Line, looking at buildings or being offered the opportunity to see things in a adaptive reuse that challenges how you look at a building. It transforms your insights. How awesome is that? So the kind of design that he's putting into our built environment is not just aesthetic, but it's transformative. And that is what I think is so awesome about what he has done in pushing through all these things. The bid for 2010, I don't know if that was one of the things I would really peg as his, oeuvre, but that's because I live in Queens, and the effect of all of the planning for the Olympic Village and its impact on Long Island City was very contentious. So I think in any administration you're going to have your glories and your guts, and I would say in total I applaud him for really assigning a value to that and recognizing that the quality of life for New Yorkers is very, very deeply affected by the built environment, whether it's a small thing like a bicycle rack, as I described, or a place where people can actually move, like the High Line, or even an Olympic Village, which would have, as you know, long-lasting impact on the future of the city. We have the cool factor. People love New York. We also have a lot of things that contribute to that. We have a long immigrant history. So we have, on top of that, everything else, we have an aging infrastructure. Our subways are very old. They're nothing compared to Washington and some of these other newer transit systems. So we have infrastructures that have to be maintained and reevaluated and looked at with the same attention to quality of life that Mayor Bloomberg had attached to design. We also have immigrant populations coming in waves and generations. That's a challenge. That's not uniquely ours, but we have a very, very strong history of that. It's the infrastructure, the immigrant population, the environment, those three as maybe linchpins in how to affect your philosophy going forward. I think that you have to do that. We are a city of waterways. We have not really paid attention to utilizing it outside of the waterfalls or a couple of ferries, but we could really be better at doing things on the waterway for quality of life for people. There are things like that that we should really look inwardly and see what are our resources, what do we have here that we can really use to make life better for New Yorkers. And we need to do that very, very closely. We don't have that much of a window of time before we all blow ourselves up. So those would be my points to consider. Well, I hope we make the right decisions. I hope we do the things that really speak to the fact that we are building for the future, that we are hopeful, and we want our architecture to embody that hope and that optimism. I went on a tour of the Museum of the Phantom City, and if you've seen that app by Cheng and Snyder, it is 50 applications of 50 renderings of projects that could have been. And you have to wonder why they were not chosen. What was the thinking of that time? Why was Buckminster Fuller's dome never realized? What was the dialogue behind that? And that's really the more intriguing question about that app. And so I think that the Museum of the Phantom City, for us 50 years from now, will be exactly that dialogue. Why did they not choose this? Why was this built instead of that? I can't answer that for many reasons, but I think that what I had said before, that there is this tug and pull between preservation, new development, the planning of architects, the serendipity that happens, and sometimes the sum of the parts are more surprising to you because they actually work in a greater sense. And I am eternally hopeful that that combined with what we are as New Yorkers, it's just really being who we are and going forward with the energy that we have, we will be in a place that people will look back and say, I'm sure that was a very interesting conversation that they had for that particular building. There is a dialogue that does not take place, but I think should take place. If you have been following our NEA chairman, Rocco Landsman's tour of the United States, he's gathering information about how we can do this better, how the NEA can be more relevant. And the Ford Foundation is going to be following up by funding to the tune of $100 million art spaces, recognizing that art is part of building. It's part of building your community. So if private sector people would talk to public sector people, with nonprofit arts people, nonprofit social sector people, nonprofit people in general, in a way to understand how do we build an environment, how do we build something that people want to live in, work in, and are attracted to, and build a culture around that, because that's the only way we're going to move together as one. So there has to be, even on a small level, if you're going to put up a building, look at the local nonprofits, talk to the constituents on the street. How can we make this work so that there is more energy surrounding that building? Who goes in it? Who's on the stoop? Who buys from the deli down the street? All of those kinds of things, if they're thoughtfully done, can make that building a place that is the cornerstone or the touchstone of a community in their community. And I think that that's the dialogue that we really should be planning to have as part of every single discussion, every policy, every step of the way in building